Should you, the taxpayer, pay for a union rep at Swindon Borough Council? In fact, two of them. A row's broken out over plans to cut the two union reps at the civic offices to save money. At the moment, they share a full-time job. Conservative MP Aidan Burley runs the trade union reform campaign. They say the taxpayer shouldn't pay for union reps. Good morning, Mr Burley.
Morning, Graham.
Margaret Thatcher tried to crush the unions. That caused all kinds of problems. Since then, we've had more of an understanding between the government and trade unions and less industrial action. Why do you want to stir things up again?
Well, what we've seen over the last 10 years is a massive public subsidy creeping up that has been going to the trade unions. And my campaign, the Trade Union Reform Campaign, is calling for an end to all taxpayer funding of the trade unions. Your listeners will probably be surprised to learn that trade unions received over £100 million from the taxpayer last year, which is the equivalent of around 3,000 full-time equivalent people working not to do the job they're paid to do at the council or the fire brigade or in the civil service, but actually to do full-time trade union activity. And we very simply think that that is wrong, that trade unions should pay for their own representation costs and that taxpayers' money should be spent on frontline services rather than on trade union activity.
But the union reps' trade union activity, a lot of that is promoting negotiation and dialogue between the workers and the employers. That stops industrial action. That actually saves us money, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, legally they are entitled currently to pay time off for union duties, which are fairly narrowly defined around representing workers at employment tribunals and things like that. But there's also this other part of their work called union activities, which is organising the demos that I understand have been going on around these two posts going in Swindon, organising the strikes and the disruption we saw last year. And that is, they are not entitled to paid time off for union activities. But one of the problems is no public sector organisations that we've come across in this country accurately record time spent on union duties, resolving the conflicts you mentioned, and time spent on the more political union activities, with the result being that the taxpayer is subsidising both. And we just do not think...
How do you define political union activities?
Well, I mean, at the moment, all union activity, all time they take off their job that they are paid to do to actually undertake union work is being given to them as paid time off their job. So these two...
But you were suggesting that they're doing something political in that time. What are they doing?
Well, I mean, I don't know what Bob Cretchley and Karen Bradford do specifically for Swindon Council, but they share a post, as I understand it, which is the equivalent of a council employee that could be that is being paid for by local taxpayers.
But you said they're involved in political activities. What kind of political activities are you saying they're involved in?
Well, I understand they've been organising a large protest against their posts being cut over recent weeks, which is not work or activity that I think taxpayers should be funding. If they wish to organise a big demo in Swindon around their jobs being cut, then I think that is something that the trades unions should be paying for, not local taxpayers. And in this age of austerity, I think local people in Swindon will be amazed to think that their money isn't being spent on council services directly.
It's not that much money. It's 250,000th of the council's budget.
Well, I'm afraid you can't have it both ways. You know, trades unions are out there now campaigning against every single cut. They oppose a single redundancy in a council, or they would oppose a single reduction of a police officer.
They also organise staff training, and they're involved in health and safety arrangements, and that's worth hundreds of millions of pounds a year to the economy. So they do some good things.
Well, hang on a second. Just to finish the last point, you can't say on the one hand, oh, it's only 0.25% of the council's budget, and then say, oh, actually, we oppose every single reduction because every post is key. If every post is key, I would argue that we shouldn't be having 3,000 equivalent full-time employees working doing trade union activities. We should have those 3,000 employees working to do the jobs that they are paid to represent, be it working in the council, working in the fire service, working in the government department. But with regard to the health and safety, I mean, look, we already have health and safety reps. We already have staff forums representing workers. We don't have a problem with what trade union representatives do. All we have a problem with is the taxpayer funding it. We believe that trade unions should bear their own representation costs from their very considerable subs that they charge members to be a member of their trade union.
What if they were part-time?
Well, I mean, many do work as a part-time trade union rep and part-time on their shop.
Are you against that?
Well, the principle remains whether they are working full-time as a trade union rep or part-time or 1 day a week or 5 days a week. And, of course, some are working full-time on trade union activities when actually being paid.
So the ones that are only working part-time as union reps, you're okay with that?
No, I'm not. I'm saying very simply that any time spent working on trade union activity, i.e. not working the job that you are paid to do, should be paid for by that trade union. And
well, Chris Grayling is the employment minister, one of your colleagues. He's gone on the record as saying he wouldn't rule out part-time reps. Are you disagreeing with him?
Well, I mean, we have part-time reps at the moment, as I explained earlier. That currently in law.
Do you agree with Chris Grayling, though?
Well, I would go further than Chris Grayling, as I've said. We have a very simple view, which is that trade union reps should bear their own representation costs. So essentially, any work done by the trade unions, much of which I agree is valuable, should be paid for by the trade unions. It should not be subsidised by the taxpayer. And after all, these are organisations that have got huge amounts of money. I mean, they're giving 10 million a year to the Labour Party. They're paying many of their leaders over £200,000 a year. They can afford to pay for their reps. They don't need this massive public subsidy of over £100 million a year from the taxpayer. They can afford to bear their own representation costs. And if they're so concerned about the front line, as we keep on hearing, then surely they would agree that that money is better spent on frontline services rather than on trade union activity.
Conservative MP Aidan Burley, thanks for your time this morning. Well, obviously...